Right. And maybe, I don't know if you know the numbers, but over the years, do you have any idea of how many PhD students, how many master students, and how many undergrads maybe
Yeah,
you've,
well, so
you've
I
mentored?
can speak in terms of this evolution group that we have here at BYU, and this has been a core of about 6 faculty or so. And I recently went through and did some tabulations because I was curious because I was at the 25th anniversary of being here on campus. And as I went through and did the calculations, I recognized that we've trained over it's about 900 students have taken the 400 level course in evolution. We've had more than 1,000 undergraduates who have had research experiences in our labs. We have awarded PhDs with an emphasis in evolutionary biology to about 60 individuals, master's degrees to 50, and we have hosted about 60 postdoctoral fellows.
Wow.
So over a 25-year period, that's a pretty good level of
And I remember,
productivity.
I was here at a time when your lab was really active because we had like 3 PhDs.
That's right.
And like 3 postdocs.
Yeah.
And
a whole
a whole
flock
bunch.
of
Yeah, a whole bunch.
undergraduates.
I'll never forget that picture that we took where
Yeah.
you've got the postdocs behind the PhDs and the
Yeah,
PhDs.
everybody's
behind-
mentoring each other. It was a very posed picture, but it served me well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was a really formative time of my career, because I was coming back from Chile,
Yeah.
where, I think Chile for me was more like an experience that maybe I should have had as an undergrad because I had no undergrad research experience at all.
Yeah.
So I did my master's degree, but then coming to your lab, for me, it was really great because there was a lot of synergy going on with the adjacent labs, and there were reading groups, and it was a really neat time for me. So yeah, I can totally say what was going on was really exciting. So recently, I came up to campus and you guys celebrated the 50th anniversary of evolution being taught here at BYU, and I know that you just did a podcast, and I'll link to that on the page here. But I wanted to come back to that a little bit because it was really fascinating again to just reflect on what's been happening in the last 50 years and that little bit of that history. Would you mind talking a little bit about why we decided to do this and maybe a little bit of the history? We don't have to go real deep, but
again, a recognition that BYU and the church has had kind of this uncomfortable history with the idea of evolution, and I'm sure you've talked about this in earlier casts, and so we won't get into the details of it. What was interesting to me was to see that it was in 1973 when BYU first started offering the first formal course in evolution. And this was offered by 2 professors. There were 2 professors who went to the board of trustees and said, hey, we've got an idea for this class. We feel this is really important for our students. We'd like to teach it. And the professors were Dwayne Jeffries and Clayton White. And both of them were really outstanding biologists themselves at the time. And so they took it to the Board of Trustees, and it was considered, and the approval came back. But with the approval came the statement, came the calling, essentially, to teach the very best evolution course that they possibly could teach. So the board didn't want us to teach some watered-down version. They didn't want us to teach some LDS version of evolution. They wanted a good academic version of evolution. Now, having said that, we also have the charge to teach the science the best we can, but also within an atmosphere of faith, with providing tools for our students to help reconcile differences or disagreements where they encounter them.
yeah. Before that, so did some faculty sneak evolution into some of their courses, or was it kind of taboo to even touch that subject?
There are a handful of faculty who were sneaking it into their courses. Vasco Tanner, who was an early entomologist, on the centennial of Darwin's birth. So actually wrote a paper talking about Charles Darwin and managed to get it published. He taught a number of entomology classes, and he taught some basic evolutionary concepts. And there were other faculty who taught about different aspects of evolution in the courses that they taught, but we never had a formal course that was dedicated to evolution.
Right. And that's the course that then you were hired to also come and teach, right?
Yeah. So it began in early 70s, and this was at a time when there was a great deal of controversy and disagreement as to whether LDS theology can coexist with evolutionary biology.
Right.
And so it was at a time when there was a lot of heat and a lot of discussion on campus, a lot of controversy, a lot of arguments.
When I remember listening on that podcast, and I had a very similar experience of kind of this, you would go to campus and go to your science class and get the pro-evolution quotes and go to your religion class and get the anti-evolution quotes.
Yeah.
Was that a problem for you? Like when you were
I can remember because I took one of the religion courses, and I had a professor there who put out a whole host of general authority quotes which were strong anti-evolutionary. And he presented them as, well, it's clear what the church's stance is on evolution, right? So, we don't need to discuss it anymore. But I'd go to the science classes and you get the opposite, right? You get a list of quotes which were open to the idea of evolution. And it almost turned into a situation of my general authority can beat up your general authority, right? So your quote came from someone who was a member of the Quorum of the 12, who was just a junior member of the Quorum of the 12. My quote came from someone who eventually succeeded to be the prophet in the church. So mine trumps yours, and that's where the argumentation sort of was.
Were you struggling like at the time, like to reconcile this, or was this something that didn't really bother you much?
It didn't bother me much, except for all the people telling me that it should bother me much. Right? I remember as being a priest, bringing my priest quorum advisor and the priest quorum to the museum and showing them around and teaching them a little bit about evolution. And my priest quorum advisor was a well-known faculty member in the Department of Philosophy, and he just would not have it, wouldn't have it at all, and put me in my place, saying that this is just wrong. But it didn't seem like it was wrong to me. It didn't. I never had a crisis of faith of, do I accept my religion? Do I accept evolution? Because I didn't see the conflicts there.
Yeah. So some of the research I've done at UVU has shown that having a role model can be a really powerful way to help students kind of work through that.
Yeah.
Was anyone a real role model for you at that time before you started graduate school?
Honestly, no.
No, you just kind of worked through it on your own.
I kind of did it on my own. And it was because I was spending every day working in an insect collection, looking at specimens, being excited to go out in the field and collect them, identifying them, where it just seemed natural and it just seemed obvious that these ideas made a lot of sense.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. It sounds kind of like you had a Darwinian experience.
It was sort of a Darwinian experience. Now, it was interesting because when I was accepted to graduate school, I got called by my advisor, who was really concerned about bringing in a student from a Christian-based university, really much afraid. He had no idea what he was getting his hands into. So I had to have some long discussions with him to say, yeah, I'm fine with evolution. This is not a problem for me. And yet I have this, excuse me, I have this memory sitting around with, this is a great memory, sitting around with my graduate committee at Cornell University, with them looking at my BYU transcript, right? And so they're sitting there and they say, oh, yeah, well, you took your biology, you got some genetics, you took evolution. Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
Pearl of Great Price? What the heck is that? And so I kind of see them glancing at each other, rolling their eyes at each other, like, who did we get here?
8 religion classes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
On that transcript.
Exactly.
So when during your postdoc time and your PhD time, obviously you become even more convinced of evolution. I mean, because you're taking now graduate courses in this. Was there ever a time that something like you really had a hang up, like Adam and Eve, or did any of those ever really hang you up?
No, they didn't. Just because I don't know why. Maybe I didn't think about it so deeply, but it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me that I couldn't figure out Adam and Eve. It didn't bother me.
Interesting.
I was interested in insect evolution, and I was so ensconced in the work I was doing and the exciting discoveries that I was finding that I didn't really spend too much time worrying about these other things. It wasn't really until I came back to BYU and I recognized that I had students who were struggling on these things, which made me realize these are issues that I've got to help students, help guide them.
Yeah, because that seems, I mean, again, my experience is also kind of anecdotal, but it seems weird to not have the problem, because I had some really dark nights. Especially in my master's degree, when I was all alone in Chile, and I was the minority, kind of like you were in graduate school. No one else is LDS, and I had no one to go to either. And it was, I guess there was an internet and there was other things I could try to do, but trying to work through that was difficult for me.